Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the News Leaders Association Awards program. I'm George Stanley, president of the News Leaders Association and editor of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Today, we'll celebrate excellence in journalism and news leadership in 2020 and 2021. This is the third year of the NLA Awards, continuing the legacy of prestigious awards given by our predecessor organizations, ASNE, the American Society of News Editors, APME, the Associated Press Managing Editors, and AOJ, the Association of Opinion Journalists. I'd like to take a moment to thank the generous sponsors of our annual NLA Awards. Thank you to editors from the former Nypd Inc., the Dallas Morning News, Advance Publications, the Donald W. Reynolds Journalism Institute, the Seattle Times, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Chicago Tribune, the O'Brien Fellowship in Public Service Journalism at Marquette University, and the New York Times. And thank you to our esteemed group of judges in 2020 and 2021, including these jury chairs: Mark Baldwin, Kathy Best, Sewell Chan, Paul Chung, Audrey Cooper, Lucy Douglas, Mike Days, Emilio Garcia Ruiz, Bill Green, Catrice Hardy, Mark Ketches, Carla Monet, Amanda Mudd, Sarah Nordgren, and Mitch Pugh. Later in our program, we'll honor all the 2020 and 2021 NLA Award recipients. But first, we'll welcome a few of our 2021 honorees to join us in conversation. Up first will be Ron Nixon, Global Investigations Editor for the Associated Press. Our first News Leader of the Year was nominated in a heartfelt letter signed by 24 members of his reporting team. Ron had an instant impact as our top editor during an unthinkably challenging time, his reporters wrote. Since taking over last March, he has inspired, increased diversity, and most importantly, led his global team to hold those in power accountable. Martha Mendoza, AP investigative reporter, submitted Ron's nomination on behalf of the team, and she will lead today's conversation. But before we shift to Ron and Martha, we have a surprise for Ron from his team.
Ron has been a transformative leader for our team.
Ron made us a team where there wasn't one before.
Your strong and steady leadership and your vision has allowed this team to produce extraordinary journalism over the last year, during a pandemic, no less.
Ron is a natural leader. He motivates us, he pushes us, and he has our back.
You have the biggest heart. You look out for your reporters, you look out for your team. You've got our backs at all times.
He's been a wealth of information that challenges me to go deeper into each story, overall making me a better journalist.
Ron Nixon possesses qualities that every editor should aspire to: passion, dedication, integrity, but also empathy.
Ron Nixon is an awesome editor and he's a super supportive boss, but more than anything, he is an amazing human being.
He came in on day one, and rather than say we needed to pick our battles or pick our spots to compete against the best in the business, he really reset our level of ambition.
He's brought vision, organization, creativity to our team. He's helped improve the camaraderie and communication.
Ron has elevated all of our work throughout the AP.
He's just smart and resourceful. He goes out of his way to make my job easier.
Ron is a fierce warrior in the battlefield of journalism, but he's also a caring friend, and whenever the fight is over, he calls to lend a caring hand.
I worked in a lot of newsrooms, I worked for a lot of editors, and Ron Nixon, number one.
We all know we're lucky to work with you. Now the rest of the world knows it too. Thanks for everything you do.
Congratulations, Ron. It's an honor to have you as an editor, a mentor, and a friend, and you are so deserving of this award.
Ron, you are the best editor. You care about us, you care about the journalism, you fight for it. We are so lucky, and I'm so proud of you.
Thanks, Ron.
I cannot wait to see what kind of trouble we get into next.
It's such a richly deserved honor.
There are a lot of outstanding news leaders out there, but this would have been an easy choice for the judges. Congratulations, Ron, not just for winning this honor, but being the first to win it. to you.
Wow.
Wow.
With that, Martha, we're over to you.
Wonderful. It's so fun to see everybody and to be doing this. So diving in, Ron, members of our investigative team, we do describe you as transformational, as positive and empowering and inspiring. And I thought because there's news leaders on this call, maybe you could just share some very specific actions you incorporate into your days that you hope has that impact on us.
Well, I mean, first of all, let me say, thank you guys for that. That was truly a shock and a surprise. And wow, and Justin in a tux. I mean, that was like that. So yeah, I mean, that was just, I really, really appreciate this. And also thank you, NLA, for the award. Gotta say, and so, but to answer your question, Martha, I don't look for things like, hey, I need to be inspirational or I need to be transformative. I just try to do things that I think need to be done. And so when I came in, there were a number of things that I thought like, well, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do that. As some of you said in the film, I felt like we needed to be more of a team. I felt like there were like several teams of investigative reporters at AP, but not a team. And so I felt like that was the first thing that we really needed to do, because I know when I was just joined, I never really talked to other people who were part of the team. Reese Dunklin, for instance, never really talked to Reese until I just called him up one day. So I felt like that was the first thing was, and so, as you remember through things like we did the baby picture thing, which is now like, that's like how you get into the investigative team. Like you have to show a baby picture, like that's like the criteria. Or the fact that sometimes we just have calls where we just celebrate a member like Jason Deering when his book came out. So, in terms of being transformative, again, it was just like, what do we need to succeed as an investigative team and be competitive in this super competitive environment? Because, it's no longer just like the Times or Post or Wall Street Journal. We've got ProPublica, we've got BuzzFeed, we've got like all of these other, things that didn't exist when you and I started as journalists. And so I just thought, what are the things that we need in order to be competitive here? What are the things that we need, bringing over a video journalist to be part of the team? Like we've never had that before, right? Because I wanted someone to think about, video not as this thing, but as a critical part of what we do. Really really reaching out to various other parts of the AP and making people feel like they were a part of what we do, and we're not some team that stands off to the side that we occasionally drop something, every 30 days or what have you. So creating the investigative correspondence program and bringing in other people to make them feel like they're part of the team. So, and as you guys all mentioned, increasing the diversity on the team was a sort of critical part of what I thought we needed to do.
So how did you do that? And what do you look for when you're trying to bring someone onto our team? What traits are you looking for in journalists?
Right. So the thing that I look for most, and this sounds, I guess, is ambition, wanting to do those bigger stories, wanting to take on these things, and not like, as Michael B. Sicker saying, picking our spots, because like, what does that even mean to like pick our spots? Like our spot is everything. I mean, we work for a global news organization. We should be able to go after anything we want to go after. So that was it. I want people to be ambitious in what they do in terms of journalists. Want people to be self-starters. I don't want to have to like just constantly have to motivate people and motivate people and motivate. Yes, there's sometimes you do, but I want people to largely be self-starters, because my goal is to take away everything that you have as distraction, so you only focus on the journalism. Like, I don't want people worried about money. I don't want people worried about resources. I only want people worried about what is the next project that I'm working on. That's it. That's all I want you to work on. I'm the wall. I'll protect you from all the other stuff that's out there. So I get the, as pass on the bad source, all those people who are angry, pass them on to me. I will deal with them. Not my favorite thing to do, but I don't want you or your teammates dealing with that. And so the other thing I look for are, people. I can teach you certain things, right? But I can't teach drive. I can't teach, the willingness to be able to dive in and just keep going day after day, even when it's sometimes you feel like you can't go any further. Or, like project that we had today, the reporter worked on that for a decade, right? Before I was even at AP, even thought about AP. But so people like that, like, because I can teach you, I can help you with the writing, right? I can help you with a lot of things, but I can't teach that inner drive. That's something that has to come from within.
But having a whole bunch of people who are all very driven and ambitious, gathering us all together in one place, that could be very complicated, I would think. And I'm wondering, do you try to have us move in one direction, or how do you kind of manage the fact that when you put all these ambitious, motivated people who want to dig all together, right. I guess I should just say, how do you manage that challenge that you have all these people?
Well, so, and I know we're going to talk about my time in the military a bit later, but, I read this book a couple of years ago. It's by this former Navy captain called It's Your Ship. And, he took over the worst submarine in the Navy and turned it around. And the way that he did that was not by the sort of, Patton-esque, MacArthur-esque leadership of barking orders at people and saying, do this and do that. Or, there's old school editors where, follow me through the, what I wanted was buy-in. I wanted people to believe that this is your team and its success or failure is going to depend on you, not me. Like, I'm going to give you what you need, but the ultimate success or failure of this team has to come from the team itself. And people have to believe that, we are the best at what we do, and so that's how you get people to buy into the concept of this team without really, making it this rah-rah thing of like, oh, let's join hands and, do this. But just like, this is your team. What do you think we need to do? Right. And then set the ambitions, set the level, set the standards for this is what an AP investigation is supposed to be, right? And then have everybody buy into that and believe that this is what we do, this is how we proceed as a team, and that we push each other to keep from falling below those standards.
Big shortfall, and you heard it from us early on, that kept us from even thinking really big a lot of the time was money, right? Like there's a saying, you don't spell cheap without AP, and we really do budget our investigations. And you kind of said, stop thinking about that, people. I'm going to get outside funding.
Right.
And you've done it. But I'm wondering, how do you how do you do that, especially for the other news leaders on this call who might want to do that as well? How do you sell what we do to somebody? How do you convince somebody they want to invest in our investigative work?
All right. Well, the first thing is I never sleep, so that's
sorry.
That helps, right? Well, you know, again, I think the work is the thing that sells the team, right? When you look at the work, you look at something like palm oil, right? Or you look at the thing that you and Juliet did with Frontline on the medical supply chain crisis as a result of the pandemic, right? You know, but on its own, like those things, if we don't tell people what they are, right? And I know that there's always been this thing, particularly because AP and what it is a news cooperative, of not really promoting yourself. I take the total opposite thing of really promoting what we do, right? Because I want people to know the kind of work that we do. And I want people to know that we have this incredible team that produces this incredible work, and I think is among the best in. And so this is what I push, and so. But more than anything, I sell the members of the team, people like yourself, you know, that this is what you're getting to produce this incredible journalism. You know, these people are among the best of the best. And so when you see our work, you know, that in of itself, I think is what drives funders to say that, listen, this is something I want to support. This is something that I want to be a part of. And it's just establishing relationships with them and also, you know, just having conversations saying that, you know, the things that you're interested in, we're also interested in. It doesn't drive our coverage, but that it is something that we sort of mutually agree that are critical issues that need to be covered.
Okay. So that's getting the funding, but you're also making these partnerships that kind of bring our reporting to a different audience. And I'm wondering why that's important to you.
Well, I think, again, because, you know, I think AP is well known, but for certain things, right? Like, to be perfectly honest, like for years, I thought of AP as like 500-600 word stories that, you know, went out, and that was pretty much it. I know that the piece that the Bridget Nogon Reed that you and several other people won the Pulitzer for in 2000, I knew about that, and I knew about, but for the most part, I think that, you know, that's what I thought about, like P. But, you know, again, it's trying to make sure that we have the work that is clear, that it has impact, that, you know, but these partnerships get us into areas that we have, like we're not strong in documentary filmmaking, right? Like, yes, we have AP Productions and we are trying to expand in that area, but I've been watching Frontline since the 80s. And I mean, like, who is better in investigative documentary filmmaking than Frontline? Or, you know, when we team up with Reveal on something, I mean, they have just really cornered the market in terms of investigative podcast, or some of the other partnerships that we have. So I'm trying to get, either the partnerships are about resources that we don't have that I can bolster our internal resources with, or getting us into areas that put the AP brand in front of people who may not be familiar with it. So, you know, if you're a PBS, you know, viewer, you may have seen AP stuff, but you really didn't know AP in the way that you saw it with the child migrant story, or the supply chain story.
Yeah, I recall you telling us all at some meeting stop saying that we're punching above our weight. Like, we're there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
listen, the Associated Press has one of the largest news staffs in the world, right? How are you punching above your weight, right? Like, I mean, it's the one thing that I wanted to like bring, and I don't want to, take total credit for this, but I think that, we have to own who we are, right? And again, I think a lot of this is legacy AP, that it has traditionally, we provide stuff to our clients, right? We don't outshine our clients. And I think that's fine, but it doesn't mean that you downplay your work, because that's why your clients buy this, because they work. And, we produce great journalism that we want people to see, and you have to talk about it. You have to let people know that this is what you do. So no, we're not punching above our weight. We're not scrappy. I mean, our investigative team is bigger than most people's newsrooms. So, that's not scrappy. That's like total mainstream, and in some places bigger than just about most people's investigative teams.
Yeah. Okay, I want to shift gears because I want to hear about how music plays a role in your life, and really, like, how many instruments do you play? What have been the names of your bands? When can we see you perform? And then, are there themes that carry from that music into your role as a news leader?
Okay, so at one point, I was music major in college, so I was not a journalism major. At one point I could play about 21 different instruments. And I learned to play them all because when I would want to record or do something, nobody was around, or it'd be like some crazy, ridiculous time in the morning. So I just learned how to play the instrument myself and just did it. And it's somewhat like Prince or, Stevie Wonder or others who play multiple instruments. And so, yeah, I've had some really strange bands. I played in a band called a punk band called Bad Fish, because, with punk stuff, it's got to be like something nasty, right? It can't be like, blooming flowers. It's got to be like something nasty, right? But I also played in a band called Maximum Funk. There's another band called Sequin Funk. I don't know why it was like Sequin, but it was just like, and I played in a band called the Rude Boys, and so I just played I played in a country and Western band. I was a session musician for country and Western stuff. I just love music. I don't care what type of music it is. In terms of seeing me perform, I think the last time I performed was early 2000s. I was in Burundi and got to share a stage with one of their biggest stars there, a guy named Steven Sono, who, but that was like the last time I played. In terms of how, music relates to this, it's about the discipline. It's the same way that when you do an investigation and you write your first draft, like there are holes in it, and it's not, it's not a finished product, and you have to go back and refine it and refine it and refine it and refine it. Music is the same way, right? You start with a basic riff, then you add, then you add, then you add, and then you're just like, well, I don't like this, or I don't like that, or I don't like that. And then, you put it down, you come back at it, and you refine it, and you refine it until you have a finished product. But it's that discipline to keep at it until you get it refined, that I think is, both both disciplines, music and journalism, are the same. And also, writing for me is about cadence, because one of the other big thing that you heard me say a lot is that we're going to do these big investigations, right? But we're not going to do like these hard news lead nut graph, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, right? We're going to tell stories. Like, yeah, we're going to do hard, and we're going to hold those in power accountable, but we're going to tell stories. But writing is also about cadence. And so when I write, I hear music and I hear what it sounds like. And so when I read copy, I'm hearing what it sounds like. If it sounds choppy, then like, well, we need to smooth that out. What about this word versus that word versus, this phrase? And so, we have these bulletproof sessions, which, I'm trying to sure we institutionalize this, but we go through the story, like the investigation that ran today. Last Thursday, we had a 2-hour bulletproof session of a story that we went line by line and both went through it for context, fact checking, but also cadence. What does it sound like? Does this sound like? So, and I think that, we have some incredible, like, senior editors, Jerry Schwartz and Kristen Gasley, who are like smoothing some of those things out even further. But that's where, music plays. I hear the story. So I always print out a copy of the story, get a cup of coffee, and I read it and I listen to what it sounds like.
I love that. I absolutely love that, Ron. That is very cool. And it's also, having co-written with a lot of people on this team, I know that we are also thinking about those cadences as we're writing, but we're not music composers for the most part. So thank you. And on that note, I do want to congratulate you on today's story, which I think you had an impact about. It was about military weapons being stolen and used in crimes. And I think that already members of Congress are talking about it. So it's just an immediate impact. Yeah. And thank you for letting me ask you everything and anything, and turning it back over to the news leaders.
Well, I will just say before we turn it over, I got to give credit where credit is due. Like, one of the news leaders on this team, Justin Pritchard, led that effort and has been doing that for over a year to get that to where it is today. My role, as in a lot of this stuff, is just providing support and guidance, and then going through and talking. He and I talked a lot about this. He and I and the reporters talked a lot about the story, but definitely Justin, that's was his baby.
And I hope for those of you who are not on our team, you can just get a sense here of how Ron is such a strong leader for all of us. So thank you for recognizing him.
Well, thank you so much, Martha and Ron. It's been just a wonderful conversation about leadership, and it's been really enlightening. I'm Miriam Marquez. I'm the interim director of the News Leaders Association. I'm thrilled to be here today, joining in the celebration, and I want to thank all of you for being here. Our next segment will feature Stephanie Clifford, who took home the Deborah Howell Award for Writing Excellence this year for her piece, The Journalist and the Pharma Bro. According to our judges, her story was well crafted and well reported, and did a remarkable job of pulling us along a wild ride about a woman who grew so infatuated with a source that she crossed every ethical boundary in any profession would consider acceptable. The Journalist and the Pharma Bro was published in Elle magazine, and Stephanie is joined today by her Elle editor, Kayla Webley, who will lead a Q&A about this incredible story. So Kayla and Stephanie, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. So I guess we'll just dive right in. I know we don't have a ton of time. So Stephanie, why don't you start by telling us how you got Christy to open up and share her story?
Sure. So this, for those who haven't read it, it's the story of a woman named Christy Smythe, who had been a Bloomberg News reporter covering courts. And she covered the case of Martin Shkreli, the very notorious hedge fund manager and farm bro, and ended up falling in love with Shkreli as she was covering him. And it's the story of how their relationship progressed and how she thought about some of the journalistic ethics and how she tackled those. So I knew Christy a bit. We worked out of the same press room in federal court in Brooklyn. I was writing for the Times. She was covering courts for Bloomberg. And we both covered the Shkreli case together. And I remember like watching as she was getting closer and closer to Shkreli as the case went on. He was the only journalist, she was the only journalist he would talk to. And I started to wonder whether there was something more than just journalist source happening there. The case went on, Shkreli was sentenced, and then it was about a year ago, I heard that they were dating, that they were sort of life partners, and she had left her Bloomberg job and completely upended her life. And it was, I reached out to her and asked if she would tell the story, and she said no. And I just kind of kept at it. I kept checking in with her saying, what about now? What about now? And finally, I think she was ready to talk about it and ready to be public about it because she'd kept it quiet for so long. And to me, it was just this remarkable story of what attracted me to it. She is a really sensible, smart woman in a lot of ways, and was making these choices that maybe a lot of us have thought about, but few of us have pursued. She divorced her husband, she left her job, she moved out of her apartment, all for a chance to be with this notorious defendant. And it was pretty fascinating.
So when you reached out to Christy, I think you and I both thought this was going to be a love story and had no idea that eventually, as it turns out, sorry for the spoiler if anyone hasn't read it, but she gets dumped in the story, which is quite the twist. And so I'm just curious, especially in light of that, the effect that it had on her relationship and kind of the exposure it brought Christy, if you felt like going into it, she really knew what she was getting herself into, especially with regard to any ethical concerns you might have had.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because it's a story about ethical concerns. It's a story about a journalist getting too close to their source. And as I was reporting it, I was like, oh my God, I have to break up with this woman on behalf of Martin Shkreli, because I reached out to Shkreli for comment. And he, in his response to me, sent through his lawyer, basically broke up with her. And I had to convey that to her. So it became a very weird story to report. I wanted to make sure she knew everything that was going to be in the story. So obviously Elle fact checked it as they always do. But I also went through it with her ahead of that, just to say, this is what I'm saying, this is what's in there, we can add in your response if you want, but I didn't want anything to be a shock to her. And I also wanted to be clear with her that there were probably going to be repercussions and make sure she had thought this through. The publicity turned out to be really crazy. I don't think either you or I, Kayla, expected it to go quite that viral. So she had New York Post reporters camped out of her apartment, like taking pictures of her. She walked her dog, and photographers, like she was getting nonstop calls. People on Twitter were like judging her mental health. So it became much bigger than I had expected. And I think, I just kept kind of checking in on her and trying to keep a professional distance while making sure that she was okay as that all went on. And she seemed all right with it. And in fact, she seemed to enjoy engaging in the online blowback. So I think she had a fun.
Sorry, I think my internet cut out. Backing up a little bit, how long did it take you to report the story once you'd earned her trust?
That was a very quick process because we wanted to get it into I think it was scheduled for the April issue of Elle. And then just after I had done a long, 4-hour interview with her to kick off the reporting. And then we heard that the New York Times was pursuing a story about their relationship. And so we just kind of kicked it into full gear and tried to, I think I probably wrote it within 2 weeks. And then maybe you could talk a bit, Kayla, about how quickly you guys turned that around and got it out the door.
if memory serves, I believe it was one of the quicker turnarounds that we've done. Just even on the print side, we were, I think, I think you filed fairly close to our deadline for our March issue because you brought this great story to us a bit late in our game in the production cycle. And so we were, I think, almost done with fact checking and copy editing and all of that. I believe it had started to circulate on page. And that's when we learned that the New York Times was planning to publish their version of the story. And we knew that they didn't have an interview with Christie, but we still knew that obviously it would make a lot of news even without that. So we rushed ours up. We decided to publish the Sunday night before Christmas, which some might have viewed as an odd choice. We had originally thought about Monday morning, but one of our executives actually at Hearst, Brooke Siegel, suggested Sunday because apparently Twitter likes a good long read on a Sunday night. And then also there's interest from media folks on Sunday nights because that's when Ben Smith's column drops. So that seems to have had some sort of effect on why it took off so much despite being the week of Christmas. So let's see. So can you talk a little bit about how the story evolved through editing?
Yeah, so I wrote the story and my first draft was not great. I was trying very hard to hit the word count. And I remember you like left a comment being like, please tell me there's, please tell me there's more detail. And just to go back a bit, a little bit about what Ron was saying, just about editing and leading teams. I would say like the work for this story started even months before, Kayla, when you and I first spoke. Like we were just kind of chatting. We hadn't worked together before. We just talked about stories that Kayla liked, things she was looking for, how she works with writers. And I was so impressed with you, and I was so impressed with Elle. And I did a shorter story for you guys in, I think, June or July about the first female federal prisoner to die of COVID. And that too was treated with like real respect and care. And there was some surprise when this story came out in Elle. People were like, why did you choose Elle? And I think it's so important that editors develop relationships, and that was a big part of this, that we had talked about this, we thought about this. It wasn't just like out of the blue. I'm brand new that I was working with Elle, and I thought that was wonderful and relatively rare, and I was really happy with that. So yes, my first draft was just too short, and you came back and you were like, don't worry about length, like let the story unfold. And then I wanted the feeling, and I'm so delighted to win this award, and especially an award for writing, because I put a lot of care into the writing of this. I wanted it to feel like a little novella, like you're walking, like almost like a horror film or a thriller where you're watching the protagonist go down a hallway and like open the wrong door that the murderer is lurking in. You're like, oh my God, don't do that. So I wanted it to feel suspenseful and kind of unspool slowly. And I felt like Elle and you really gave that room to breathe and room to tell the story at its own pace, and to not have, it would be so easy to overdo a story like that, and it was dramatic enough on its own that I almost needed to pull back on the drama and let the readers get involved in it.
And how did you decide how to craft the surprise ending? And I'll just say to all of you watching, she did not tell me that twist was coming, so I read the draft blind. So.
I did. I wanted you to be startled just to make sure that it was landing correctly, so I didn't give you a heads up about that. I knew I wanted to end with like Christie in this new life that she's created, sitting in her apartment, kind of thinking about Martin. That seemed to me to be the right ending. And I didn't want to put that breakup up front because it seemed, I think if I were writing it for somewhere else, I might have, or if I were writing a news story, I might have, because that's sort of the headline. But I wanted people to feel really invested in her story, and I don't think people had to agree with her decisions. That wasn't the point. But to care about what happened to her and what happened to the relationship by the time that they learned that Martin was dumping her via his lawyer in this very public way for this story. So it, again, just thinking of it a bit like a novel, you have to get to know the characters, you have to come to care about them, you have to understand the stakes, so that what happens to them will have real emotional resonance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I thought you did that so well. You never made fun of her. You know, we weren't taking cheap shots that we could have taken.
Yeah, and I didn't want to. It wouldn't have been an interesting story had she not been a bright, sensible woman with a really good career behind her. Because that, you know, if she was just a silly gal who was trying to date Martin Shkreli, like, who cares? It was interesting, I think, especially because I wrote it in the midst of, when we were all in the midst of lockdown. And I think everybody, especially during COVID lockdown, was just like, what if I throw it all away? What if I leave New York? What if I give up my job? What if I do this? Like, we were all just feeling a little desperate and crazy. And here's somebody who had the guts, if you want to put it that way, or the idea to follow through with that and see what happened.
Mm-hmm. So we teased this a little bit earlier, but can you talk a little bit more about the basically instant reaction that happened when the story went online?
Yeah, so, you know, with every story you write, you always hope that, like, it will take off and people will read it. And so this one, it went up on Sunday night, I think around 5 or 6 p.m. And almost immediately I was getting like a little bit of Twitter reaction. I remember I was just sitting at home and I called my husband. I was like, oh, a couple of people are retweeting it already. And then it just went viral in this pretty shocking way for me. Like, I was at the Times for a long time. Stories have gone big, but never like this, where I was like, when I was updating my Twitter every 30 seconds, it would have 100 plus mentions. I couldn't even get through them. Like, my accountant, who doesn't read anything but like Excel spreadsheets, called me to say, like, I saw your story. My second grade teacher called. It was so crazy. And it was so crazy to see people's reactions, where everybody had an opinion on it. Everybody had a pretty strong opinion on it. Many feeling like she had made terrible decisions. Christy had made terrible decisions. And it was the start. I think it was, you would have the numbers more than I do, but it was just wild, where for like 2 days, it was nothing but retweets and attention. It felt honest. It felt good. Like, I think we all hope that our stories get that much attention, but it was also very weird to be on the other side of that.
And I also think it's, a lot of stories get retweets or this and that, but like, this generated so much conversation. Everyone had an opinion. People, and almost, I would say within 20, 30 minutes, were able to like start subtweeting it without even mentioning what story they were talking about. They were talking about it. I had already mentioned Ben Smith. He mentioned he was going to like take the night off, which he did, but it felt nice to hear him say that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really incredible. And as we saw all of this attention happening, and the New York Post parked outside of her apartment, and I believe the other publications like New York Magazine, I think, wrote about this story like 5 or 6 times. So we also were like, we should, maybe get in on some of that action. So can you talk a little bit about, you worked with our web team to produce a very quick kind of 24-hour follow-up story.
Yeah, and that was very smart on your web team's part, I think, where they saw the initial huge burst in traffic, and then they saw a lot of the traffic being diverted to the sites just doing their takes on it. To the point where like people were mentioning the story to me and they hadn't even realized that it had run an L. or that I'd written it in several cases. But my aunt was like, "You might find this story interesting." I was like, "Thanks, Joanne." So the L web team said, like, let's get some of this traffic back to us. And so I did a Q&A with Christy 24 hours later, just asking about kind of her reaction to the piece, her reaction to the reaction, what she thought about what people were saying about her. And it was funny because somebody on Twitter was like, "They're just doing this for the traffic." And I was like, well, yes, like Elle invested the money to photograph Christy, to pay me, I'm a freelancer. Like it's fair that Elle gets to do some follow-up on this too. But that was, yeah, I thought that was a smart follow-up on Elle's part. And I should also say I was delighted to see so much reaction about Elle being the place to publish it, and so much support for women's magazines. Just like people were like, "Why is a women's magazine publishing this story?" And then so many other people were like, "Because women's magazines do serious investigative journalism time after time after time." And like, how hard did they have to scream and yell to be to have that reputation, which is true and well deserved.
Yes, so I'm very glad to have any opportunity to remind people of that. So I definitely did that. Well, I think we have to wrap up now, but is there anything else you want to add before we turn this back over?
No, well, yes, I want to thank the NLA for the award, which is really meaningful to me. And I am so happy to be honored alongside all these other amazing newsmen and newswomen. And I'm so glad that there's an award out there for writing. There are so many of us working so hard at it and trying and editing and learning. And I'm very, very glad to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Me too. So I guess now we'll go back to NLA.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie and Kayla. It's been great to share the behind the scenes on this. I wanted to, for our final segment before we begin our award ceremony, we're going to be joined by a few of our 2021 honorees. Christina Jewett from Kaiser Health News was part of the team who won the Batten Medal for coverage of the coronavirus pandemic for Lost on the Front Line by Kaiser Health News and The Guardian. Michael Baker from the New York Times was part of the team who won the Dory J. Maynard Justice Award for I Can't Breathe by the New York Times staff. Jack Dolan from Los Angeles Times took home the Frank A. Blethen Award for local accountability reporting, along with his colleague Brittany Mejia. For their project, Deadly Delays, Jack and Brittany were just named finalists for the Local Reporting Pulitzer Prize for the same project. And now Michael Days, NLA's immediate past president, will lead the conversation. Mike, over to you.
I see that on TV all the time, then I do it. So sorry. Thanks much, Miriam. And thanks much to our honorees for making the time to be with us this afternoon. A couple of things. If you have read their work, you know firsthand of its excellence. If you have not had a chance to partake of their work, do so. You can find links to all their work on the NLA website. So what we want to do for the next 20 minutes is throw up the proverbial hood on their respective projects and talk a bit about how these brilliant packages came to be and the lessons learned in the midst of COVID-19, in the midst of racial reckoning, and in the midst of economic and political uncertainty. Great projects, I believe, start with great ideas and good times and bad. So Christine, I wanted you to start this off and talk about the idea and how it took flight, the idea that led to the discovery of initially 3,500 healthcare workers succumbing to COVID, most in the first few months of COVID. Now, it's brilliant in the end, but you were jumping out there a little bit, weren't you? You and the team on this package?
Yeah, we started in March, actually. The Guardian came to us with this idea, and I remember I got a cell phone call from John Hillkirk, my editor, and I immediately saw the value, because doing investigative reporting in the healthcare space for 10 years, I know that hospitals are not going to be issuing press releases about their workers dying. So very early on, it became an art in project management. John Hillkirk and Jane Spencer from The Guardian took the lead, and we built an interactive where we ultimately profiled 350 of the workers who died, and where we featured our rolling count that ended up with 3607 in a year. And I took the lead on the enterprise from the KHN side. And early on with the stories, we could see it was going to be important, because we did a story right off the bat that the CDC's method of counting wasn't going to be too good. They ended up with 2,000 fewer counted than we did, and that the surgical masks were not going to be protective enough for the healthcare workers. And also that the first ER doctor that we knew about who died, we had his texts. The Guardian reporter Alistair G got those about his serious concerns about PPE. And he also had full-throated denials from the 2 hospitals where that doctor worked that there was any kind of PPE shortage or problem. So that's, April of 2020, we had a feeling we were onto something, and we, just kind of kept rolling from there.
Okay, and then Mike, the whole country stopped when they saw not more than 9 minutes of George Floyd being murdered through suffocation, and that obviously became the catalyst for the racial reckoning. And there were several others, of course, but 70 people. You found 70 people. How did that come to be?
Well, yeah, it began. This was something that began right after the George Floyd killing, but it actually was spurred by another case in Tacoma, Washington, that was sort of starting to emerge around the same time, Manuel Ellis. And in that case, just in the few days after George Floyd's, the George Floyd protests, the videos were coming out on the Manuel Ellis killing and him pleading, "I can't breathe again." And so that was, obviously that brought us back to George Floyd. It brought us back to Eric Garner, who had this, was saying the same thing in 2014, and sort of led just to a discussion internally, like, how many of these are there out there? I mean, these are obviously 3 major cases or 3 cases that were drawing a lot of attention, but, are there a bunch of others that were maybe a little more off the radar? And so editors committed 5 reporters to look at this, thinking that really it would be helpful to commit the resources now, do this immediately, as opposed to, having 1 or 2 reporters sort of pick away at it over a longer period of time. And so, yeah, I mean, initially it was hasty Googling where you're like, all right, well, actually, here's 5 more cases, and now you're at 10. And that's kind of, that's, quite a few. And then once we started getting into court records, collecting videos of in-custody deaths and reviewing those, gathering, making transcripts of sort of these cases, gathering police records on some of the in-custody deaths. And suddenly it's like our spreadsheet kept growing, it was like, then you're at 15, then you're at 25, then you're at 50. And by the end it was more than 70. So that's sort of how it sort of began and evolved.
And Jack, I know in a sort of back and forth, you mentioned that the LA Times project started well before COVID hit, and in many ways had to compete with COVID in that second year of your work. But for me, ultimately, it was another stark reminder amid the reckoning that poor people often do not get the medical attention they deserve. Talk about the idea and the endurance involved in getting that baby published.
Well, the idea sprang from a tip, really, from a group of healthcare workers at LA County's safety net.
Am I frozen or is Jack frozen?
Pardon?
It's you, Mike. Jack, go ahead. Keep going.
Okay, so we got tips from people who work at the LA County safety net hospital system that treats like 2 million people. Those fortunate enough to have insurance at all are on Medicaid, essentially. And what these people were, doctors and nurses were telling us was that, they set up appointments for their patients to see cardiologists, neurologists, dermatologists with fear of melanoma, and it takes forever for them to get an appointment, and that a lot of patients actually die of the condition they were waiting to be treated for before they're ever seen by a specialist. So we needed two things. We needed actual cases, and that's hard because the only way to prove it beyond the objections that the administrators would inevitably raise was to have their medical record. And the only way to get a medical record, I mean, a doctor and nurse cannot leak that to you. It's a crime to do so. So we had to reach out to their family members, most of whom had no clue that their loved one had faced, this terrible, terrible delay. So we had to persuade them that we were credible, that we knew what we were talking about, and then ask them if they would please request the records from the hospital system. And the hospital system over and over again either released partial records or just frankly bullshit. And we had to stay on them and sort of from the background, helping these families push back and get the records they needed. The next step was, okay, but is it just anecdotal? So we needed to get data that would prove that these waits are, way too long. Fortunately, our chief adversary in the administration had published an academic paper touting his new computer system and had used it himself to show that the wait times, which once were even worse, like far worse, had been reduced to just very, very bad. So we asked for an update of that database. And, all of this that started in September 2018. We were finally ready to publish in March of 2020. And then COVID happened. And suddenly nobody anywhere, on the planet was getting appointments with specialists. So it didn't seem like the worst health crisis in the world at that time. So we had to just drop it and start covering COVID.
There are a lot of editors on this call tonight, and I'm sure all of us are wondering and say, what were the secret sauces? I've heard interactive spreadsheets kept you all together. Basically, just old-fashioned, old-school reporting and data. Dare I say, some sharp editors who were good listeners. Collaboration among reporters. What worked for each of your projects? Feel free to jump in, please.
I can dive in. We had, incredible support. There was midstream fundraising. We had to support two recent college graduates who trawled the web every single day for cases of healthcare workers dying. We had freelancers all across the country. We had college students at Mizzou, at University of Arizona, at Columbia, contributing profiles to the interactive. I was doing enterprise, and I got support from very talented freelancers who I knew were sort of out there shaking around, who could help out on investigative stories. So, really, there was a major dedicated, concerted effort to Lost on the Front Line that I'm really grateful for. And just being a data-oriented person, having this data machine behind me was just like, it was heartbreaking. It was horrifying what was happening, but it was also just a wonderful way to do some enterprise that no one else could have done. We cross-referenced places where workers died with places that had previously had PPE complaints, and sort of, found dozens of cases where there were PPE complaints. Later, someone died, and we, reached out to those families and got their text messages about, asking the family for gardening gloves and garbage bags as PPE before they got sick and died. We took the 300 written profiles toward the end of the year and realized that only a third of those had never been reported to OSHA as worker fatalities. And I had helped to call all those employers and reach out to about 100 of them and ask them why they didn't report those deaths. And that led to a story. So you know, I guess the special sauce was a lot of support and an energetic, curious team, and, you know, some tissues, because I lost it, you know, talking to a lot of those families. I was doing profiles throughout to just keep my finger on the pulse of what was going on, and it was hard.
Yeah, and I'd say for ours, I mean, our project here was certainly a lot shorter, more condensed time period than what Christina and Jack and the work that they did. So I think for us, the editors, I think I was really appreciative of their commitment and vision of being able to say, like, you know, this is something we want to get done sooner rather than later. This isn't something we want to, you know, see a final product next year or by the end of the year. Like, this is a moment where people are trying to understand what's going on in policing now, and we need to do this story soon. So I think that commitment of having 5 reporters be able to really crash on this, and then, you know, obviously we were all working from home normally, but also in different parts of the country, and so the ability to collaborate on Google spreadsheets. I mean, our spreadsheet kept growing over time. You know, more columns and more columns as we really try to dive into the details of each case. So, you know, listing here's a column about taser usage and what happens in each case in terms of tasers, whether there was one used or not, you know, and those types of things really helped us. I think one of the really helpful things of this project was being able to have a slice of in custody deaths and being able to dive into them in a really detailed way, as opposed to looking at you know, thousands of police shootings and deaths. But here we have a sort of a small slice to look at. And we learned things along the way. I mean, in this case, there were several cases involving spit hoods that police used when they're restraining people. And, you know, like for someone like myself, I just had no familiarity with spit hoods or why they'd be used or what the impacts would be. And in looking at, you know, the transcripts of a lot of these cases or watching the videos, you know, we kept seeing these officers responding to these people saying, "I can't breathe," with some version of, if you can talk, you can breathe. And that led us sort of down that path of, well, the training and some of the culture of where that saying came from, because it kept coming up repeatedly in these cases across different departments. So, you know, I think all those things sort of really helped bring us, you know, new insights and a story that was more than just, wow, there's a lot of cases of people saying I can't breathe, but what can we learn from them as well?
I think for us, like knowing how to do an investigation, knowing how to get the data and analyze it, I've been doing this almost 30 years. I felt like I could probably do that. The hardest part of what we did was reaching out to these families and first explaining why we were reaching out to them and persuading them to trust us enough to go through this long, arduous process of getting their records. And we were looking around the newsroom for the right person. And there's a lot of smart people at the LA Times. But my editor and I kind of zeroed in on Brittany Mejia, because she's young, but my God, she gets things done. And I figured there was about, you know, she'd probably have about 10% success doing this. And I don't think she ever failed. She would drive across the country, you know, the state, out into the desert and bang on these people's doors. And I actually had pangs of guilt for these reluctant families because of the, you know, charm offensive that was heading their way, and they stood no chance. So her ability to persuade those people and to, you know, the care and feeding that went into keeping them on board as the county, you know, failed to give them records and we had to go back and go back and go back. Finding somebody who could do that, had the energy and the sheer persistence to do that. That's why the story actually got in the paper.
I want to get a couple more questions in, but we're running out of time. One, I went back and reread everything you guys wrote for your respective packages in the last few days. And to be honest with you, I was an emotional wreck. I mean, I'm an old school guy that came into journalism long before some of you were born, and we didn't talk about the emotional toll that these things can take on us. How did you get through it? And, given the year we were having just last year, and being alone and not having the sort of the sanctity of the newsroom, how was that? How did you keep going?
I mean, I'll just throw out, I was just incredibly thankful. I mean, our whole team was emotionally battered by this, but I mean, COVID was just, so incredibly devastating. The feeling that I could sort of walk upstairs to my home office and like do something, like feel like I was part of some kind of, just shining a light in a corner where these deaths, were, to some degree preventable, and just kind of banging on that drum. I mean, it gave me the sense that like I wasn't just watching like this, this house fire with completely helpless. It was like I could grab a garden hose and splash some water on it. And I hugged my kids. I called my mom. It's the usual stuff. Hug my husband. It just makes you so grateful. I told my sister, I was like my mom will do like some really cheesy stuff on Twitter. I'll write some story. She'll be like, those people should get arrested. I was like, you know what? Mom's got a free pass for the rest of life. I'm never going to criticize her again, ever. I don't care what she does. She can go rogue. Like, I'm so glad I have my mom, so, you just find that perspective to try to, just keep going and try to find those, silver lining kind of things.
Yeah, I echo that completely. I agree with you absolutely, Christina. Having the work and having something meaningful to do in a time that was so otherwise barren was actually it's what saved me. It's having something important to contribute and to concentrate on is the only way I got through that.
Yeah, I think in some ways we're still trying to figure out how to handle the challenge of last year and the mental health implications of it all. Because yes, it was, for a lot of people, a lot of reporters, it was a huge investment of their lives into this, and just now sort of trying to process it all in some ways. So I've been grateful that the New York Times had proposed these sort of global days off this year, which has been, I think, just sort of trying to emphasize a time for reset and time for to get away and to find some more peace. And so I think I'm really grateful for that, for sure, because it was a year that didn't seem to end, and it's been a bit of recovery since then.
Just quickly, do you see any follow-ups emerging from these powerful packages?
I could write a book.
Okay.
Nobody's calling though.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah, I think for us, just to get back to the point of our spreadsheet and having, there were more columns and more details in that spreadsheet than we put in our stories, but it led some of the reporters to do. There was a recent investigation that a couple of the colleagues on this project did, focused on sickle cell trait and how often that gets cited as a justification reason for the death of a person in custody, and more focused on things like prone restraint and hog ties and neck restraints, and all. I think all those things have led to more story ideas and more exploration and things to do in the future. So I think it was really helpful to have that spreadsheet as a base now that we can share around to others to guide future stories.
Two state healthcare regulators announced that they were launching investigations when we approached them in February of 2020. Those investigations remain ongoing. Last I checked, not holding my breath.
Christina, Jack, Mike, thanks for taking the time. You make us all proud. Thank you.
Appreciate the honor.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I echo Michael's words. Thank you so much, Christina, Jack, and Mike. Now we're going to move on to our NLA Awards ceremony, where we'll recognize excellence in journalism and leadership for 2020 and 2021. Up first, we'll honor our 2020 awards recipients. Alison Gerber, our NLA board member and awards committee co-chair, will take it from here. Alison.
Thank you, Miriam. I'm pleased to recognize the distinguished writing, digital storytelling, and photography honored in last year's NLA Awards. Here are the 2020 winners. The Batten Medal for Courage in Journalism, Perversion of Justice by Julie K. Brown, Emily Michaud, and the staff of the Miami Herald. The Dory J. Maynard Award for Justice in Journalism, The 1619 Project by the staff of the New York Times. The Frank A. Blethen Award for Local Accountability Reporting. This one has a large and a small category. Large, The Quiet Rooms by Jennifer Smith Richards, Jody S. Cohen, and Lakedra Chavez from ProPublica. Small, Lawless by Kyle Hopkins and the staff of the Anchorage Daily News. The Deborah Howell Award for Writing Excellence, which also has large and small categories. Large, Fight the Ship, Death and Valor on a Warship Doomed by Its Own Navy by the staff of the Los Angeles Times. Small, Eric Boudman's Writing About Medicine by Eric Boudman of Stat News. L. Newharth, Breaking News Reporting Award. The Indictment of Former Mayor Catherine Pugh by the staff of the Baltimore Sun. The Mike Royko Award for Commentary and Column Writing. LA Homelessness Crisis by Steve Lopez of the Los Angeles Times. The O'Brien Fellowship Award for Impact in Public Service Journalism, The Opioid Files by Scott Higman, Sari Horowitz, and Stephen Rich of the Washington Post, the Berle Osborne Award for Editorial Leadership. This one also has large and small categories. Large, Criminal Justice in Los Angeles by Robert Green, the Los Angeles Times. Small, Death Without Conviction by Jeffrey Garrett of the Palestine Herald Press. Punch Salzburger Award for Innovative Storytelling with large and small categories also. Large, Long Island Divided by the staff of Newsday. Small, Code Red, Baltimore's Climate Divide by the staff of the University of Maryland's Howard Center for Investigative Journalism and Capital News Service, in collaboration with National Public Radio and Wide Angle Youth Media. The First Amendment Award, It's Time for You to Die, How Flaws in the South Carolina Prison System Led to 7 Deaths in a Single Night, by the staff of the Post and Courier. Visual Journalism Award, with also large and small categories. Large, A Mother's Love, Caring for Lizzie, by Richard Song-Tatari, the Star Tribune. Small, Visual Journalism by Mark Lambie, the El Paso Times. And finally, the Barry Bingham Senior Fellowship in recognition of an educator's efforts to encourage students of color in the field of journalism goes to Mei-Ling Hopgood. This fellowship is a tradition that has been continued by NLA after ASNE merged with AOJ in 2016. Professor Hopgood from Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism, Media, Integrated Marketing Communications. Her initiative as faculty advisor for the Northwestern chapters of both the Asian American Journalists Association and the National Association of Hispanic Journalists cannot be ignored. According to her dean, Professor Hopgood regularly engages real conversation about diversity in meetings and classrooms and is recognized throughout the industry as an evangelist for diversity. Congratulations to all the 2020 winners for the incredible work. We applaud you. Now we will recognize the 2021 NLA winners. George, over to you.
Thank you, Alison. I'm delighted to recognize this year's NLA Award recipients. These awards reflect the extraordinary journalism produced during one of the most trying years we've ever seen and the unprecedented special circumstances that news outlets had to overcome to produce such excellent work. Now, here are our 2021 NLA Award winners. The Batten Medal for coverage of the coronavirus pandemic. Lost on the Front Line by Kaiser Health News and The Guardian. And here's what the judges had to say. This project did what the federal government did not. It accounted for unnecessary tragic deaths of frontline health workers due to inadequate planning, testing, coordination, and protective gear. The sign said heroes work here, but the employers didn't treat them that way. The impact of this compelling, essential journalism will continue to be felt for a long time. The Frank A. Blethen Award for Local Accountability Reporting. Deadly Delays by Jack Dolan and Brittany Mejia of the Los Angeles Times. From the judges, the reporters found that patients without good insurance waited an average of 89 days to see specialists, and that many continued to get sicker and died while waiting. They built a database looking at 860,000 records of referrals, then did the shoe leather work to track down individuals and reveal a health system that leaves poor people waiting for the care they desperately need, often with no knowledge of how they're being treated or any power to improve their care. The Dory J. Maynard Justice Award for I Can't Breathe by the staff of the New York Times. From the judges, the Times' exhaustive and groundbreaking reporting used data, documents, interviews, and video to reveal that police misconduct has been pervasive throughout the United States for decades. It reviewed 70 suffocations of citizens in police custody and disclosed the previously unknown scale of such incidences. George Floyd's last words, "I can't breathe," had been spoken by many others as they died in police custody. The Deborah Howell Award for Writing Excellence. The Journalist and the Pharma Bro by Stephanie Clifford, published in Elle. From the judges, this story did a remarkable job of pulling us along on a wild ride about a woman who grew so infatuated with a source that she crossed every ethical boundary any profession would consider acceptable. It was the most compelling and riveting read during a year of strong writing. The Punch Salzburger Innovator of the Year Award for Missing Them by the staff of The City with Columbia Journalism School and the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY. From the judges, this profoundly human journalism project was relevant, powerful, and replicable. The project offered a sense of how much the city of New York lost in the pandemic. Missing Them put the audience at the center of obituary storytelling, describing lives lost and missed that no other media organization was covering, and presenting these life stories in a comprehensive way. The Berle Osborne Editorial and Opinion Award for columns by Janae Osterhelt of the Boston Globe. From the judges, these columns explore America's complicated and often brutal relationship with race with a clarity that demands attention. Osterhelt fearlessly tackled the deeply personal while also demonstrating an ability to step back and vividly contextualize the intersection of race and culture in our society. A beautiful but powerful voice working at the height of her powers, showing readers why this moment matters. The First Amendment Award for the NYPD files from the staff of ProPublica. The judges said this project makes clear the lengths to which America's largest police department has gone to prevent the public from seeing how it fails to police itself. The series shook loose reforms that are beginning to address NYPD's worst inclinations. After mining data that NYPD tried to keep in the dark, ProPublica built a searchable database for all to peruse, ensuring that the First Amendment is alive and well, still helping citizens stay in charge of the authorities who work for them. This year, we're giving out a President's Award to Kalu Chow and the journalists of Voice of America. We're giving special recognition to Kalu Chow, who as program director for Voice of America courageously stood up for fact-based reporting against constant political pressure from the Trump administration. Established to offer independent fact-based news to people living under autocratic regimes that control what everyone reads, sees, and hears, Voice of America was in danger of itself becoming a government propaganda tool. The Trump administration aimed to spread its messages about COVID-19 and the presidential election through VOA. Chow stood against efforts to compromise VOA's integrity. She became a named plaintiff in a federal First Amendment lawsuit against the agency that governs Voice of America. This gave the lawsuit the standing needed for a federal judge to issue an injunction that prevented additional political interference. When I told Kalu about the President's Award, she said she was just one VOA staff member and that hundreds of others had resisted political interference at great risk to their careers. And so, for refusing to bend their coverage despite threats they would be fired, we honor the more than 1,000 full-time journalists at the Voice of America with a President's Award. News Leader of the Year, Ron Nixon, Global Investigations Editor, The Associated Press. From the judges, Nixon was tapped to lead his team in March 2020. He led and inspired his colleagues to produce important, ambitious work through an unthinkably challenging time. Their work both helped free a man and put another in jail. Their investigative series on labor abuses in the palm oil industry, Fruits of Labor, won the 2021 Selden Ring Award for Investigative Reporting and the 2021 Anthony Shadid Award for Journalism Ethics. Nixon advocated that the decision to diversify news staff ultimately rests with those who have hiring power. And then with remarkable speed and determination, he turned his words into action. Nixon built a more diverse team and created opportunities for less experienced reporters. His message has been clear: break down internal barriers and infuse the broader AP with greater investigative capacity. One of the most enjoyable duties I've had in the past year has been telling Ron Nixon that his own reporters nominated him for this honor. For a moment, Ron, a Marine combat veteran, could not speak. When he was able to get the words out, he said, "I'm just trying to be the kind of editor I wish I had as a reporter." Well, he's done a pretty good job of that. And he did it in a year of working remotely, helping his staff get through all the challenges they faced, looking out for them. This is exactly what NLA is all about. So those are words we can all live by from our News Leader of the Year. Let's be the editors and leaders we wish we had. It's our team. It's our music. Congratulations to all our winners. We're so impressed at how you persevered through the most challenging year in any of our careers to tell important stories, to expose problems, to present solutions, to speak truth to power. We raise our glasses to you. I'm going to raise a good Milwaukee glass of beer. Thank you to everyone for joining our celebration today. As we hope you'll stay in touch with the News Leaders Association, get involved, join a committee, as we aim to support journalism that informs democracy. You can learn more about the 2022 NLA Awards or our transformational diversity efforts and upcoming training and events at newsleaders.org. Have a great evening, everyone, and thank you for being part of this.